Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the number 5 on our CPAC anti-racism webinar series. Today's topic is on school bullying. And I want to welcome you to this seminar. My name is Andy Shi, and I'm the Executive Director of CPAC, which is formerly known as the Chinese Professionals Association of Canada. 各位大家好。今天呢，我们是反对种族歧视的第5讲，专门讲学校的霸凌。如果你想听中文的话，在屏幕下面右手边有一个翻译的这个符号，画了一个地球。你点击里面以后，你可以点击中文的频道，这样你就可以听中文的同声传译。然后你点完了以后呢，再点下面那个 Mute Original Audio。你就可以没有噪音了。如果你想再听英文，还可以再回来。So that's very convenient. For everyone that not familiar with CPAC, let's just take 30 seconds to tell you who we are and what we are about. CPAC is a membership organization as well as a service provider. We have slightly more than 30,000 members who are immigrant professionals range across really all the professional fields. We have a series of membership service items. We have a number of benefits for members, ranging from preferred rate for home and auto insurance to no-fee credit cards. So you're welcome to check out on our website, and we're welcome to join us. Our requirement is basically a bachelor's degree from any recognized university anywhere in the world. Now on the service side, our focus is on internationally educated development programs, a mentorship program. So all these programs are for career and professional development, focusing on immigrant professionals and youth from immigrant families. We also have an advocacy mandate. We advocate on issues important to Chinese communities, and these are basically issues in today's webinar is since the outbreak of COVID-19, we have seen a rise of racism behavior against Chinese communities and people look like Chinese, basically East Asians. So to help the community deal with these attacks, both on the street and online, we have designed a series of webinars divided into 5 topics, and starting from an overview of racism, its history in the various forms, visible and invisible, on the street, in your workplace, in schools, in the government, in institutions. So from that, we go to a webinar on how to respond to racist harassment. If you are a target of attack or harassment, how do you deal with that? And we have a seminar on that. We also have one for bystanders. If you witness any risk behavior, how can you intervene? How can you help the target, the victim, in a way that is de-escalating, that is peaceful and effective? We also have a session on hate crime to be delivered by York Region Police. And because it's going to be a police presentation, so we also included personal safety and property safety in that seminar. So the 5th topic is on school bullying, which is today's topic. And we have really searched all over North America to find the best expert in this specific field to present these webinars. And in Canada, we have found that Samuel Kim, who has a master's degree and is now working on his PhD in clinical psychology at Queen's University under Professor Wendy, and who is also present to the have a question, you can type in to the Q&A place. And in the end, we'll answer this question. So Sam and Dr. Krieger will both be answering your questions. Now, Sam has been very well received in the Kingston community in his presentations, and that's why we have invited him. He is now actually working directly with children and youth in clinical setting, especially young people from vulnerable families and communities. He has a passion about integrating cultural factors into his clinical work, and really specialized in the school setting and researching on how we can shape the school environment that's better support children in vulnerable situations. And that basically means people of diversity, cultural background, and other situations. And we are very much looking forward to today's presentation, because we have always have a concern that children of Asian descent will be bullied in school. We saw that happen during SARS, and we know it's going to happen again during COVID. So today's webinar is very timely, and we're very pleased to that Sam and Wendy can take some time from their busy schedule to prepare a very thought out seminar for us to help parents and to help your children to deal with bullying in school, either just pure bullying or race-based bullying. And I know that Sam has quite a few slides on these issues. And without further ado, I want to turn the floor to Sam for the presentation.
Thank you. I'm just going to go share my screen. Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel. I'm a PhD student at Queen's University, working under the supervision of Dr. Wendy Craig, who is the scientific director of PrevNet, Promoting Relationships and Eliminating Violence Network.
这样的一个网络叫做促进关系与消除暴力网络，包括很多研究人员，还有相关的政策制定者等。
To talk to you about promoting healthy relationships and preventing racial bullying. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about how we can define what bullying is. Bullying behavior is an aggressive behavior that is intended to harm others in the context of a relationship where there is a power imbalance. Aggression and power imbalance are the core attributes that are always present in bullying. So when we think about bullying, we think about those four key characteristics: the presence of a power imbalance, the fact that it is an aggressive behavior that can cause either physical, psychological, or educational harm to those who are victimized, that it's intentional, that it's done with a purpose of asserting power over those who are more vulnerable, and that it is also likely to repeat. It is not just a one-time event. Power imbalance in a social relationship can occur as a result of several different factors. If power is used to harm others, it is an abuse of power. So when it comes to social relationships and peer relationships, power can be held because of different characteristics. So socioeconomic status, the number of friends a child might have, the child's gender, age, popularity. These characteristics can be characteristics that provide one group of youth power over another. Now, race, culture, and ethnic identity is just one of those characteristics that can give power onto a group of youth to abuse onto another group of youth. So power imbalances are perpetuated in some cases, just by the fact of group membership. And in the context of the coronavirus pandemic, there has been this imbalance of power that has placed Chinese children and other East Asian children in general in positions of lower power or perceived power just because of their association with China, East Asia, or coronavirus. Bullying is different than teasing. It's important that parents and teachers are aware how to tell the difference, how to distinguish between teasing, which can be positive, versus bullying, which is always a harmful, negative experience. When trying to distinguish between teasing and bullying, it's important to ask these 5 questions. First, is the behavior reciprocated? Well, when it comes to bullying, bullying isn't usually reciprocated. There's clearly someone who is engaging in the bullying and someone who is being victimized. In contrast, teasing involves a back and forth between individuals and is shared equally. So it's a two-way street when it comes to teasing, whereas bullying is one direction. The second question to ask is, do both people look like they're having a good time? Usually, teasing happens within an already existing positive relationship where both people are sharing in that teasing experience. It's used as a way to bond and show affection. On the other hand, bullying is definitely one-sided. The child who is being targeted is in distress or harmed from somebody else. Third question is the behavior fun? Teasing can be fun and enjoyable for both people who are involved. It should be playful and positive, whereas bullying is a negative experience where someone intentionally causes others to be afraid or hurt. It is not a positive experience for those who are victimized. The fourth question is to ask, has this happened before with these individuals? For both teasing and bullying, they tend to happen repeatedly over time. So teasing tends to happen within relationships that are strong, and it's done in order to demonstrate affection and demonstrate closeness. Bullying also tends to happen repeatedly. It's not a one-off experience. It tends to happen over time, frequently within relationships. Finally, and most importantly, is there a power differential? A key difference between bullying and teasing is that when two people are engaging in teasing, there is no power differential. Teasing is done between two equally powerful individuals to show closeness and affection. On the other hand, in bullying, there is always a power imbalance. The power is abused by someone in order to harm the other person. So when parents and teachers, I would recommend asking these 5 questions to check whether or not you should be concerned about our child being bullied or engaging in bullying itself. Just to recap, racial bullying is never fun. It can be repeated. It always causes harm to the child being targeted. And it always involves a power imbalance between children. I want to review the different forms that bullying can take. Bullying can occur in a physical manner through behaviors like hitting, kicking, shoving, or even stealing or damaging other people's property. Bullying can be done verbally through name calling, making hurtful comments, humiliating others, or even non-verbally through harassing and humiliating others physically. It can be social in nature, such as excluding other kids from activities, purposely damaging relationships, spreading lies, rumors, or embarrassing secrets without other people's consent. Bias-based bullying involves treating people with disrespect and abusing that power because of the other person's identity. And this identity can be based on ethnicity, culture, religious beliefs, their gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability in appearance. Finally, bullying can happen virtually over electronic forms, using email, social media, and text messages to cyberbully others. Racial bullying is just one form of bias-based bullying. It's about targeting someone for who they are in terms of their ethnicity and their cultural identity. It is about targeting someone specifically because of that identity itself. It's important to realize that racial bullying, even though it is a bias-based form of bullying, can actually take on these different forms. It can be perpetuated physically, verbally, non-verbally, socially, and electronically. Racial bullying can happen across all of these forms. So if we were to define racial bullying can be described as an aggressive behavior that is perpetuated within a power differential that harms others based on their racial or cultural difference. So in the context of racial bullying, power is used to harm other people's sense of their cultural or racial identity. Some examples of how power can be used to harm others' cultural sense of self could be saying bad things or negative or hurtful things about a cultural group, calling someone racist names, telling racist jokes, or even perpetuating negative stereotypes. The COVID-19 situation has created an environment where Chinese or East Asian youth in general can be more easily targeted by racial bullying. The pandemic has clearly associated Chinese and other East Asian youth to the coronavirus and identified them as being the outsider group who is responsible for what's happening. What this has done is it has set the stage for racial bullying and racial discrimination to happen more and to be more tolerated. In the context of COVID-19, racial bullying might involve saying negative and hurtful things about China, Chinese culture, or Chinese individuals themselves. It could also be about negatively associating children to the ongoing pandemic. It could also be about perpetuating negative stereotypes about China, its culture, and also about the coronavirus itself. So what do we know about the problem of racial bullying in Canada? Well, in the 2010 Health Behaviors Among School-Aged Children survey in Canada, about 1 in 5 boys, that's about 20% of boys, reported experiencing racial bullying at least once or twice in the past 2 months. Girls were less likely to experience racial bullying than boys. For girls, racial bullying decreased as they get older, whereas for boys, racial bullying actually increased in higher grades. Some other things that we know about racial bullying that happens in Canada is that in Canada, ethnic minority youth are in general more likely to be racially bullied compared to ethnically majority youth, so Caucasian youth. This is especially true for younger children in elementary school. Furthermore, we know that ethnic minority youth are more likely to experience bullying at school in community contexts that are less ethnically diverse. So in contexts where there's less representation, there is often more bullying that occurs for ethnic minority youth. So why might racial bullying happen? Well, one theory that helps us understand how racial bullying might happen and might arise is intergroup conflict theory. What this theory tells us is about how humans tend to behave whenever we are in groups. From a very young age, children tend to form groups and differentiate themselves from other people, other children, based on different individual characteristics. So these things can be based on gender, grade, interests, values, physical appearance, such as skin color, or other culturally driven characteristics like spoken language, cultural practices, and beliefs. So cultural and ethnic background is just one of many characteristics that influence how children form groups and identify themselves as being different from other people. Once we are in groups, we begin to behave in ways that favor our own group against other groups. So what happens is we start to make comparisons between ourselves and others who are different than us in order to support our own sense of self, in order to boost our own positive view of ourselves. So we tend to feel better about ourselves when we believe that we belong to the better group and that other people who are not like us are kind of the worst group. What research shows is that if people are randomly divided into groups, over time, we just naturally tend to respond with in-group favoritism, which is that sort of I like my group because and the qualities of our group are very positive, and outgroup discrimination. So we treat other people who do not share the similar qualities as us with biases and discrimination. So what naturally tends to happen is we begin to take an us versus them mentality. So these naturally occurring group processes set the stage or create the context for racial bullying to occur, as people tend to bully those who are outside of their own group. Over time, some people or some groups tend to gain status and power, and others become more vulnerable to being victimized. Racial bullying and racial discrimination happen because of these sort of naturally occurring in-group and out-group processes that are happening based on racial and ethnic identity. Members of minority groups, including East Asian individuals, may be more likely to become targets of bullying and discrimination because of power imbalances that arise between ethnic minority and ethnic majority groups. So when we think about the coronavirus situation, outgroup discrimination is happening right now as we speak. Certain attributions, certain links are being made between Chinese ethnic identity and the coronavirus itself. And what that's doing is it's creating this power imbalance that favors the in-group, which is the sort of collective majority in our society, and identifies Chinese and East Asian individuals as this other out group that can be discriminated against and that has less power than the in-group. When we think about racial bullying that might happen with kids during the coronavirus situation, what this coronavirus pandemic has done is it's created a larger context in which racial discrimination, racial stereotyping, and racial bullying is tolerated, more likely to happen, and promoted. So what the coronavirus has done, has associated minority groups with the virus itself and identified East Asian youth as the outgroup. The outgroup is more likely to be stereotyped and discriminated against. What this does is it increases stigmatization of Chinese and East Asian cultures and youth. And finally, the result of that, the consequence of that, is that it increases isolation, feelings of isolation, and decreases Chinese and East Asian youth's ability to participate in the in-group. It further divides us in terms of the power dynamics. So we briefly talked about how racial bullying happens as a group phenomenon, where children in the in-group are more likely to target and discriminate against people or children of the out-group based on biases about others who are not similar to them. What we know from research is that bullying often happens in groups. Peers are often involved in bullying as bystanders. So both members of the in-group and members of the out-group witness the bullying occur. In fact, what the research tells us is that bystanders are present in about 85% of bullying situations. Now, bystanders can be either part of the problem or they can be part of the solution. Some bystanders can make the racial bullying worse. They can do that by supporting the child who is bullying through laughing, cheering, and clapping at negative jokes, negative stereotypes, or negative comments, which ultimately reinforces the bullying perpetrator. On the other hand, other bystanders can improve the bullying situation by defending the person who is being victimized. Sadly, we know that bystanders only intervene to help the victimized youth only in about 11% of the time. What's important to realize is that bullying is a group phenomenon that harms everyone involved in the bullying situation. Children who receive the bullying, and children who do the bullying, and children who witness it are all negatively affected in different ways. So for victimized youth, we know that experiencing bullying is related to lower academic achievement and increased risk for developing mental health problems. Racial bullying harms victims' ethnic self-esteem, so their feelings about their ethnic identity and their sense of self-worth. Being racially victimized or discriminated against during adolescence negatively impacts stress, anxiety, and motivation later in life. For the bullying perpetrator, engaging in bullying, including racial bullying, teaches children about abusing power in their relationships. This puts them at risk for continued interpersonal violence at their workplaces and in romantic or dating relationships. Finally, for bystander youth who witness bullying, witnessing bullying can be related to feeling unsafe in their school environment and feeling that their well-being is compromised at school. Furthermore, witnessing racial bullying specifically or racial discrimination could negatively affect bystanders' own sense of cultural identity. So to summarize, racial bullying contributes to a negative school climate where all students feel less safe, less connected, and less included. So given that peers are present in most bullying situations, it is important for us to recognize their power to be part of the solution to bullying. So what we know is that victimized youth are more likely to tell a friend about bullying than they are to tell a teacher or even their own parents. And observational research tells us that peers can be effective at stopping bullying when it happens. But some children might actually lack strategies to intervene effectively when they witness racial bullying happen. So what we need to do as adults, as parents, educators, as adult support, is to give children evidence-based strategies that they can use to support victimized peers and effectively respond to racial bullying situations at school. So, some effective strategies can be: 1, reporting the bullying to an adult on their own or with friends. 2, supporting and comforting the victimized child by inviting them to play a game, including them in activities, or using comforting words and demonstrating empathy. By supporting and comforting the victimized youth, peers can actually help reduce the negative stereotypes and in-group favoritism that is related to racial bullying. One other strategy is assertively labeling the racial bullying behavior and telling the person to stop in the moment. Even though this strategy can be effective, it's important to recognize that children shouldn't be asked to risk their own safety and engage in this strategy. So this assertive communication by peers can put an end to the racial discrimination or bullying that is happening, and that signals to the rest of the peer group that such racial discrimination and negative stereotypes and biases are not okay and not acceptable. As adults, I think it's important for us to recognize that these strategies should be done in a way that's safe, and we should empower kids to engage in these strategies in a safe manner. So parents can make a difference by helping our children understand their roles when they witness bullying happen. So parents can teach children how they can respond when they see it happen. All children can make a difference in the moment. We just need to help our children safely use these effective strategies to stand up for friends who are being targeted because of their cultural background. Parents can start by having open discussions about if their children have ever witnessed bullying at school and reviewing what happened. Parents can also provide information about how children can respond next time if the bullying happens again. So it's important for adults to be able to identify bullying when it happens. To review, bullying is always negative, always a red flag. Children who are bullied and those who bully others and those who witness it are all negatively affected. It can be hard for parents to identify that bullying is happening because bullying is often kept hidden from parents. Children are really good at keeping bullying hidden from adults. Furthermore, shame is a huge factor that influences youth who experience bullying to not talk about their experiences to adults. Racial bullying can be even more shameful and embarrassing to talk about because it's about something that we cannot change. And it is at the core of who we are as people. So reducing shame about talking about such difficult and vulnerable topics like bullying is an important step that parents can take. Identifying bullying is important because it helps adults like parents or teachers address bullying so that it does not get any worse. Ultimately, it's important that parents can communicate to kids that addressing bullying is important because it's not a normal part of growing up. So when parents want to help children respond to bullying, the first step should be talking to our children and helping them identify what racial bullying is. So to review, the four sort of key components of bullying are important. There is always a power imbalance. Bullying is repeated and it occurs over time. Bullying harms those who are victimized. And racial bullying can happen verbally, socially, physically, or even electronically using devices. Next, parents can help children identify strategies that they would feel comfortable and safe using when experiencing or witnessing racial bullying. So it's important to review who the child can seek help from at school. Who are the trusted adults? Where can they find them? If they're out in an unsupervised area, where could they go to find a teacher that they can trust? Parents can also review strategies that children can use to respond when children witness racial bullying. So those strategies of reporting it to an adult, comforting the victimized peer, or assertively communicating to the person who is doing the bullying to stop the behavior. It's important for parents to provide children with skills to evaluate whether or not that the strategy that they used was effective. So parents can help by following up to see whether the bullying situation stopped or it's actually continuing to happen. Parents can follow up with children about how they feel about themselves, how safe they feel in their classroom and school, and how safe they feel within their peer group. So it's important when talking about bullying with kids, especially racial bullying with kids, for parents to consider how children might feel too embarrassed or ashamed about what their experiences are like at school. East Asian children especially may find it hard to let parents know about bullying situations because they think it might be a burden on their parents. I think parents can initiate these open discussions to make it easier for children to share what they witness and experience at school. Some tips on starting that conversation with kids would be for the parents to initiate. So children and youth might feel too embarrassed or ashamed to confide in parents about something hurtful like racial bullying. So it's important that kids know that they're going to have a receptive and empathetic audience who will listen about their concerns. I'd encourage parents to talk openly and often about peer relationships and bullying with their kids. Share any bullying experiences that you might have had when growing up. And use resources like shows or books as a way to have conversations with kids about stereotypes, culture, race, and healthy relationships. Next, when children and youth have difficulty reporting about bullying, because they aren't sure how adults will respond. So it's important that adults do respond sensitively and with empathy when children do talk about bullying experiences. Thanking children for taking the courage to speak out about something hard like bullying is a good step for parents to take. And it's also important for kids to feel that they have autonomy. So try to respond in ways that show that you want to keep your child safe and that you care, but in a way that is not over-controlling or overreactive. If you become very angry or upset in the moment, children can feel less safe talking about bullying with you in the future. Parents can also praise and practice inclusive and respectful behavior with their kids. So parents set the tone for family relationships, and children learn relational skills by watching their parents' behaviors. So practice tolerance and model the use of positive power by respecting and supporting other people. Encourage positive relationships among children by praising respectful and inclusive behaviors when you observe it. And I think when it comes to racial bullying, it's important that parents also role model cultural sensitivity on their own. Children learn about their own culture and also how to interact with people of different cultures by observing their parents. It's important that adults role model inclusive behaviors and respect for diversity. We can role model how to talk about people from different cultures, and we can make sure to use culturally sensitive language and not to use stereotypes when we speak about different groups of people. Practicing how to treat others' cultures with respect is the best way to help our children learn what is okay and not okay when others talk about our own culture and ethnicity. And I'd encourage you to also celebrate your own culture. We know that children's sense of self is boosted when their own cultural identity is celebrated and nurtured. And so that could be a good way to mitigate some of the harms that are associated with experiencing racial discrimination and racial bullying. Parents can also partner with schools to prevent bullying. So parents can learn about the Caring and Safe School policy. Every school has a Caring and Safe School policy that highlights how schools plan to prevent and respond to bullying. This policy also talks about what the roles of parents, teachers, and administrators are in order to create a safe school for all students. This policy focuses on using a whole school approach to prevent bullying and to effectively intervene when it happens. It highlights what parents and guardians of students who engage in bullying and those who have been harmed by bullying, that they be notified by the principal when bullying occurs. This policy also notes what information the school has to share with you when bullying happens. Schools are mandated to provide parents a way to report instances of bullying as well. So learning about this policy, about how schools will respond to bullying, will help parents feel more prepared to respond to bullying situations. I think parents, it's important to recognize that contacting teachers when you feel worried is a good step to take. Teachers are caring, trusted adults at school who can effectively intervene when bullying happens. Teachers are knowledgeable and trained in policies and how to address bullying when it happens in the classroom. So it's important that parents connect with teachers when they're concerned about bullying that might be happening. Parents and teachers can communicate a safety plan to keep a child safe from bullying in the future. Parents can contact teachers to follow up about whether the safety plan was effective. And parents can also learn from teachers about what they're doing as sort of and setting as classroom expectations about what children are to do when they see or experience bullying. So being very communicative and connected to your children's teachers would be a good way to understand and know how the school and classrooms are responding to bullying. Finally, I think parents and teachers can work together to encourage children to report bullying when they experience it and when they witness it. So make sure that your children know that it's a teacher's job to deal with bullying, and all instances, like racial bullying, should be reported. Children often mistake telling as tattling. So you can remind them that tattling is what you do to purposefully get someone in trouble, whereas telling is what you do to get someone out of trouble and to prevent them from experiencing harm. Provide them with specific ways that they can report bullying and who to go to, who might be a good person to go to when they are in different places at school. It takes courage for children to report bullying, and it's parents' jobs to encourage children to do so. So, to summarize, racial bullying is an abuse of power that occurs due to biases and discrimination from one group to another. And it's about harming others based on their ethnic or racial identity. The COVID virus has increased the chance that Chinese youth are harmed by racial bullying and discrimination because it has kind of furthered that power differential that exists between the in-group, the rest of the children, versus the out-group that has been identified and associated with the coronavirus. We also reviewed that peers have the power to help racially victimized youth by using those specific strategies to support and to report bullying when it happens. Parents play an important role in preventing and addressing bullying. One, they play an important role in practicing and promoting cultural sensitivity, but also talking with their children about how to respond to bullying situation when it happens. Parents also play an important role in communicating with schools in order to prevent bullying situations from happening again. So thank you for listening to my short explanation of racial bullying during the coronavirus pandemic. I appreciate your listening, and I will open up the floor for questions, and Dr. Wendy, Craig, and I will try our best to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
All right, if you have any question, just type it in the Q&A session. In the meantime, Drew, do you want to do the poll right now? Yeah, if you could, we have a little poll there. If you could fill them very quickly, it takes 30 seconds. And are we about half done?
Not yet.
Yeah, if you could take 30 seconds to fill in the poll there, I would appreciate it very much. So we thank you for helping us get some feedback from you so we can improve future webinars. This is the last one of the first round, and we're going to do this again. And if you like the content, we encourage you to tweet it and share it on social media and to let your friends know too, and come back for the second round of these seminars. All right, so
Here is the result.
okay, we got 28% people have witnessed COVID-related racism. That's, I guess, the key finding. Yeah. We have a second one. Yeah, this one really takes 5 seconds. So if you could help with some feedback on the second poll, we'd appreciate it. We'll give it a few seconds, then we'll go into Q&A. All right. Well, we're giving Sam a little break, and more important, give our translator a break.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been working hard. Simultaneous translation is very, very exhausting. And, all right. Okay. Yeah, this is mainly for our internal feedback to arrange things. But yeah. Thank you. All right. So now let's go into the Q&A. We already have a few questions there. And Dr. Kirk, would you like to come up and I'll stop your video so you can maybe help with the answers? There we go. So everybody, this is Dr. Wendy, correct? And Sam's supervisor, who is a leader in these issues. And she will help with the questions. So now, I guess the first question is, when bullying is happening, when someone is being bullied, what are the things to say and do that you can recommend?
So are we, sorry, just to make sure I understand the question, someone is experiencing the bullying, what can that person who is experiencing the bullying do in the moment?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So that's a very good question. And what we would recommend to kids is to respond in ways that are safe. We don't want to perpetuate more harm. So what we know is responding in an aggressive way is actually going to make the situation worse. So we never advocate for kids to respond to bullying with even more bullying or aggression. Now, we talked about one way that children can assertively communicate that this behavior is not okay and that it won't be tolerated in the context of peers defending each other. But that's something that someone who is victimized can also do. But I think it's important to recognize that in the moment that can feel unsafe to do. And so that's not a suggestion that I would say everybody should do this, but that is one possible way to assertively communicate that the bullying behavior will not be tolerated.
Yeah, I think what's really important when you think about what the advice to give your child is to understand what are your child's strengths. So if your child is a child who feels confident and can assertively tell the child who's doing the bullying to stop, then they might engage in that response. If your child is one who has a sense of humor, sometimes using humor in the moment is effective. One of the most effective strategies is actually to engage with another peer that might be standing around and watching, and ask that peer, hey, Joe, do you want to go and leave? And so to get out of that situation. But I think the most important message is there's not one way of responding, that when you respond, you want to make sure the most important thing is that you're safe. You don't want to, and the third thing is that you don't want to respond aggressively, because that will actually escalate and make the problem worse.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it reminds me of a situation that I had when I was growing up. Someone in my childhood actually made a very insensitive comment about, hey, Sam, are you Chinese or are you just Asian? And I remember feeling taken aback and not knowing how to respond. And like Wendy suggested, I used humor in that situation and said to him, well, you know that there's maybe more countries in Asia than just China, and there's lots of other countries. And that was a really helpful way for me to use humor and lightheartedness to respond to a situation that kind of felt hurtful and insensitive.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So would that be a different response outside the school versus on the school ground?
I'll take a quick stab at this one first. I think one of the important things is that I think the question was about experiencing racial bullying outside of school. So some of the same strategies that Wendy suggested can apply outside of school as well. So things like using humor, assertively communicating to the person who's doing the bullying, but also seeking help from the right sources of help. So these can be in sports settings, it could be a coach. In church settings, it could be a church leader. So there's different adults in each sort of situations that could be helpful to respond and prevent bullying happening. Mm-hmm. One other situation that I'm thinking about is online. So if racial bullying happens online, there might be some unique ways that they can respond to the racial bullying that happens online than in person. So online, there might be ways to either disconnect from the situation itself, to assertively communicate in an online forum or an online setting that the bullying is not tolerated, or using tools that are provided in online settings, such as reporting or flagging negative and insensitive and hurtful comments could be a good way to address some racial discrimination and bullying that happens over the cyberspace.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to tag team on to Sam's great response, which was, and augment the messages, which is, you know, when bullying happens at school, we know that schools have policies and procedures to address it. So we tend to try really hard to get children and students to talk to adults in school so that they have that. But when they're in other settings, like walking to and from school, adults may not be present. And so the most important thing that we do is have children identify as safe adults in different places that they can go and talk to. Because at the heart of bullying is a power imbalance, that child who's bullying has more power than the child who's being victimized. And so they need adults to step in and right that power imbalance and make that more equal. So really important to, one, create a relationship with your child that enables them to disclose what's happening and going on in their lives. And two, really important to have conversations with your child about where, in all the different places that they live, learning and working and playing, who are the adults in their lives that they feel like that they can go to and confide in when something goes wrong.
Okay, here's a tough question. If someone looks like Chinese but not Chinese and being mistaken as Chinese and being verbally assaulted, how should that person respond?
That's a good question. And I just want to refocus the question back into why that might be happening in the first place, right? So we talked about these in-group and out-group processes. So what is happening here is that East Asian individuals that share some of these physical characteristics that makes it hard for us to be distinguished, we get lumped into this kind of collective out-group just by these shared characteristics. And that's what is possibly perpetuating the negative stereotypes and biases that are being, directed at non-Chinese individuals as well, related to the coronavirus and racial bullying in general. And so I think some of the things that we talked about in terms of responding to bullying in general apply here as well. Just because it's about Chinese versus non-Chinese cultures doesn't really make a difference in terms of how necessarily you respond to the bullying situation or how peers respond in bullying situations either. These are sort of universal sort of approaches that work in bullying situations.
I think a couple of months ago, a Korean American reporter wrote a very nice article. I don't remember in New York Times or another newspaper. So she was taken as Chinese, and she used to respond as clarifying that she's not a Chinese. Then she realized, no, that's not a good response. And people shouldn't be bullied or discriminated against. Doesn't matter you're Chinese or Korean anywhere. So I can't remember the name, but that would be something for people to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not every children is very verbal, especially for Asian children. If they don't tell the parents or they don't say very clearly, how can parents find out things? What should parents do, to prevent such things?
Yeah, so the question is about if my child isn't actually telling me or disclosing to me that bullying is happening, how can I make sure what's actually happening at school? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned how for East Asian youth, especially, talking about bullying might be more tough. And I talked a little bit about that in the presentation. I think it's important that parents create a sort of safe and open conversation around healthy relationships in general and how school experiences are like for kids in general. And it all comes back to sort of those healthy relationships that happen in the home. Creating those healthy relationships will help children feel safe enough to disclose what's happening in school that feels embarrassing or feels shameful to talk about. So I think from a parent's perspective, it's really about taking a step back and really doing the work in creating a safe, inclusive, and non-judgmental conversation about relationships and bullying.
So you're talking about the family relationship. The next question is about family. So if a kid is given a nickname which he or she doesn't like and feel like not bullied but somehow disrespected, now how should the parent, deal with this and to help the child, meanwhile not damage the relationships?
This is a very specific question. I want to be very sensitive to the fact that I am not aware of your family dynamics, and I don't know what would cause damage in a family relationship for you, the person who's asked this question. But I think it's important that as parents, that we make sure to set boundaries for our, like, what is okay and not okay for our kids to experience. So, even a nickname can cause distress and can be upsetting for our kids and for us as parents. So if that is the case, I think having those conversations with the people who are continuing this behavior, even though it is causing harm, would be a great step in communicating that this is what this behavior is doing for my child and for myself, and that this is not going to be tolerated, and this is not going to be something that is accepted in when interacting with your child.
I think that's a really important point, Sam. Like, one of the things that we could do to prevent bullying is check in with our children and make sure that, and find out what their day was like and what happened during their day. But the other thing that we can do is we can check in to see what the impact of some of these behaviors are. So even if you're not concerned about a nickname, you can ask your child, how do you feel about your nickname? Do you have another nickname that you would prefer? Start a conversation and just check in and find out what their experience is of that nickname, what their experience, and if it's distressing, then you need to make a plan together and let the child lead, empower them to make decisions about what they want and how they want to go forward.
I think that's very important. I can remember when I was a child, I was called ugly something. For many, many years into my adulthood, I always thought I was ugly. So that does have some negative effect. All right, so our next question is, you mentioned about, bullying increases among males, but decrease among girls. How does that happen?
So the graph that I showed is specifically about racial bullying and not about general bullying. So what we know about racial bullying in particular is that for boys, it tends to increase with age, whereas for girls, we see a slight decrease with age. And so I don't think I can answer the question of why does that happen or how does that happen, but that's something that we do observe when we ask children about their racial bullying experiences.
No,
I think one of the things that happens with age is that children to develop have greater cognitive skills, so they're more able to understand the experience of the others, and so they're able to develop a sense of, like, not only what empathy about what they're going to feel like when kids experience things, but they can also understand what's going to be the most effective thing to say or do to harm another. And so as kids develop these more complex thinking skills, they actually become more effective in how they bully and how they go about bullying others. And so part of that is that when children bully others, they look to bully. The content is usually about what's this person most vulnerable about. And that's so because that when you bully, the child who's doing the bully is trying to gain power by harming or hurting them. And so by understanding what the child's most vulnerable about is then going to be most likely to make the bullying the most effective.
So the next question is a little technical. If a bully happens in school, do you call the teacher or call the principal?
I think it's fair to say you can contact both, and you should contact both. One, the principal is responsible for the well-being of the school as a whole, and needs to be aware of bullying situations that happen, but also classroom teachers who are responsible for some the expectations and how the classroom functions also needs to be aware that this has taken place. And so I would say that as a parent, you should contact both. And I believe that as part of the caring and safe schools policy, that there is a way for parents to report bullying. There's a system involved in terms of reporting bullying, and parents can do that. And usually, I think I've seen websites associated with each of the schools that help parents report the bullying incidents.
So I'm just going to add a little bit to that. So one of the things that I think about is, what are the steps? So the first thing that you need to know, if bullying happens at the school and the school knows about it, then under Ontario law, the principal must inform the parents. So you must be informed if the school knows about it. So, if you were to receive that call, I always tell parents there's 4 things I would ask. What happened? What are you going to do to ensure that my child is safe at school tomorrow? And then can I check back with you next week to make sure that my child is still safe? And what can I do to support the school's actions? So I think it's really important. So schools must report bullying to you. The other piece is, I always tend to also say, one good place to start is the teacher in the classroom. One of the advantages that teachers have is that they have a window on how all the kids are interacting in that classroom. And so if you're worried at all, go to that teacher and ask them about, tell them you're concerned. I'm concerned that my child may be bullied. Have you noticed anything? Could you keep an eye out for what's happening, and let me know and support my child because I'm concerned about it. So if you have the worry or the niggly, then go to the teachers and work together so that they can help you address the problem, or at least assess if there is a problem.
Excellent. So finally, Sam, can you quickly go through the strategies for peer support again among students? There was a request for that. So
yes, so I talked about 3 sort of different strategies that bystanders can take when they witness bullying happen. One is reporting the bullying situation to an adult, either by themselves or with a group of friends. So we know that reporting tends to be difficult for those who are directly victimized. There's different barriers that make it hard to go and seek help from an adult directly. But having a friend who helps in reporting that situation can be very beneficial, because it lets adults who are very effective at stopping the bullying from happening again, and it informs them so that they can actually take action. The second strategy I talked about was comforting and supporting the victimized peer. So that can be done in different ways, using comforting language and empathetic language to demonstrate that you care for the victim and that you wish them, you want things to be better, and you want to support them. But it could also be done in a more social relational manner, in terms of including them in activities if they've been excluded from activities in the past, including them into the peer group. So strategies that comfort the victim. And then finally, the final one was assertively standing up in the bullying situation in the moment. So communicating to the person who is doing the bullying that to stop the bullying and that this isn't going to be accepted and tolerated. Now, I also added that this one in particular can feel less safe, because in a way the bystander is getting in potentially harm's way of being, you know, potentially targeted for standing up for a peer. So I think it's important to, like Dr. Wendy Craig said, to promote children's strengths. So to use their strengths to their advantage. If your child can safely and effectively use that assertive skill, then that would be a good one to use, but it's not for everyone, and it shouldn't be just done all the time for everyone.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sam and Wendy, for a very clear, very well organized, and informative and helpful presentation. I'm sure the audience have got a lot from this, and to help their peers or their children. And for those who still want to know more, I welcome you come back again for our next round of this webinar, so you can have a deeper understanding of the principles and strategies. And so I want to thank you again, Sam and then Wendy, for excellent presentation. Thank you, audience, for attending, and we hope we'll see you again in our future seminars, and there will be another one coming back in the next week or so. And just pay attention to our announcement, and you can go to our website to register for future presentations. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. This concludes our webinar.